This is an open letter to the pharmaceutical industry. I think you guys have been caught up in a groupthink, and I'm hoping to paint a picture that might shift your perspective a little bit. I hope to a more realistic view of where you are and where you have placed yourselves. You're in a dangerous position. Towards the end of this video, I'll have a little bit of advice that I think might help. But let me start by reminding you about what happened in 2008 when the housing market collapsed. And whose fault was that? Well, the narrative that we've been left with is that it was the greedy Wall Street bankers. And is that true? Was it due to greedy Wall Street bankers? Well, absolutely. That's absolutely true. It was greedy Wall Street bankers. The Wall Street bankers themselves said it was the government's fault. The government thought that home ownership's the route to the middle class. We'll just encourage subprime lending, and magically people will enter the middle class once they own a home. And are they to blame? Yeah, absolutely. There's plenty of blame to go around here. These are not exclusive things. It was greedy Wall Street bankers and Congress and the people who did the borrowing. They have to take responsibility as competent adults for borrowing more money than they could repay on what? The theory that real estate always goes up? I mean, these are adults. They can presumably read. The thing is, because everyone is to blame here, this is a measure of social power. Individually, people in the middle class have almost no social power. But collectively, they're a raging bull elephant, which is why politicians tend not to cross the public. They would never say to people that you're facing the consequences of your own bad decisions. That's a non-starter in politics. So, who gets the blame? The guy with the least social power, or at least propaganda power, the Wall Street bankers. And it has the virtue in this case of being at least partly true, part of the truth. So I bring this up. You'll see the analogy where I'm going with this in a couple of minutes. That's the narrative we're left with. It was greedy Wall Street bankers who caused the problem. Now, as far as your situation goes, I think the way you have the people in the pharmaceutical industry see themselves is as good, heroic people who have risen to the challenge of the COVID epidemic, and you pulled out all the stops and got a vaccine out there as quickly as possible, and you're saving people. I think that's how you see yourselves. And I think the idea that your motives are pure will somehow protect you from consequences is an illusion. I mean, even just as I say it, doesn't it sound wrong that having pure motives will protect you from the negative consequences of your actions? Does that match your experience of life? I want you to, you got to get beyond that. The other thing I think is going on is that you feel that everyone's on your side, because at the moment, everyone is on your side, or at least all the people who have social power. The politicians are backing this vaccine with their reputations and credibility, or so it would seem. The medical community is behind you, the press is behind you, and the public is clamoring for these vaccines. Everybody is on your side. Everybody is with you. And that, again, makes it seem like you are protected if something goes wrong, because everybody wants it. And also, you've got high-priced lawyers who've told you that all the I's are dotted and all the T's are crossed and everything's... You're immune from any problems that result. Let me paint a picture for you why that's wrong and how the tide will turn, or at least could turn. I don't know that this is going to happen. It depends on, to a large degree, on how things go with the vaccine. Let's start with the suspicion of a malincentive on your part. If we go back to 2019, and if in some legal process, for example, your internal memos are subpoenaed, if it turns out that it becomes public how you were talking to each other and to yourselves about the state of your pipeline, was it flush in 2019? Or was it a little dry, except maybe for this new vaccine technology that was in development? This is the answer to that. We don't really even need to see your internal memos. All we have to do is watch over the next few years and see if any blockbuster drugs come out. Your product development cycle is so long that you can't hide the fact that it was dry, if it was dry. If we see blockbuster drugs coming out, then this isn't a problem. But if over the next 4 or 5 years we don't see much, that's evidence that there was a malincentive going into this pandemic to get this vaccine technology up and off the ground as quickly as possible. That's the first thing that'll happen, is the suspicion of malincentive will arise. Now, there's a lot of advertising I see from your industry about just how great and innovative you are. And that, I don't know, I find that a little puzzling, because I realize there's a lot of barriers between you and the end user. You got the insurance companies and the hospitals and the regulators and the doctors, and there's a lot of buffers between you and the end user. But speaking as an end user, I'm not all that keen on innovation. The truth is, I want the pharmaceutical equivalent of a stodgy old bank run by guys who learned their trade in the Carter administration, for whom prudence is the watchword, who lend money to home buyers and use the profits to pay interest to their depositors. A proven system. I consider my health to be like my retirement savings. I don't want to give it to some kid out of Columbia Business School with an expensive suit and a flashy new derivative swap product in his pocket. I want proven. And I'm not being offered it in this pandemic. I'm not being offered old-fashioned vaccines like grandma used to make. The only thing on offer is this new unproven technology. And I find that problematic. It doesn't smell right. It doesn't seem right that I have no options here. And I understand why innovation is a thing you emphasize, because investors want to see innovation, because you can patent innovation. Old stuff that's off patent, there's again a malincentive to avoid it, even if it's the best thing. And this is going to come up in the public consciousness. Right now, there's still this anxiety, this panic that we're coming out of around COVID. 2 years from now, it's not going to be like that. There'll be something else. There'll be the next thing to panic over. This will have faded into the background. And when that happens, if anything at all, and I mean anything at all, is wrong with these vaccines, it's going to be big in the public mind. You're going to have hundreds of millions of people looking down at their arms and going, "Oh my God, did I, in the moment, in the anxiety of the moment, agree to have something harmful injected into my veins?" The public is going to, the anxiety around that is natural enough that it could well become a big thing. And by the way, it doesn't even have to be true, does it? Do vaccines cause autism? No. Didn't keep it from being a pretty big kerfuffle. And that was mainly among parents of kids with autism. That's a pretty small subset of the population. How many people have taken this vaccine? The public, as the anxiety over COVID declines, the anxiety over the vaccine is a natural substitute for it. And if the public starts to turn, the press is going to turn. We saw recently that CNN is apparently planning to make global warming the next big clickbait, the next big thing to build anxiety over and get eyeballs from. That's not a very good choice, actually, global warming, I think, if I were running CNN, for a couple of reasons. One is the effects are subtle and long-term, and it does have the advantage that you can virtue signal over how low your carbon footprint is or something like that, and you could be better than the next guy, I suppose. So that's a psychological hook to it. But it's asking people to give up things they don't want to give up. Dealing with global warming means using less energy, less material. It means diminishing your lifestyle, essentially. So I don't think it's a very good choice. Plus, you have to train people to see every heat wave is climate change and every cold snap is weather. So you have to massage people's psychology to get them where you want them to be. And that's not true of you. It's only once the press realizes that as the anxiety from COVID declines and the potential anxiety from the vaccine increases, that's personal, and it's very widespread throughout society. How many people have gotten the vaccine? This will move papers. This will get eyeballs on the screen. This is you are the potential that something is wrong with the vaccine. That's going to be attractive to journalists. And suppose for a moment that there is something wrong with it, then you're really screwed because who's going to be to blame? Just this 2008 was the fault of those greedy Wall Street bankers. This is going to be the fault of those greedy pharmaceutical companies who pushed out an unproven technology with no long-term safety data and did it for the money. You might think medical ethics would require a new technology like this be introduced slowly and minimally until you have the chance for post-marketing surveillance. But that's not how it was done. It was Pfizer's vaccine hasn't even finished phase 3 trials. I don't know about the others, but it was released under emergency use authorization, just the name. Is that how you want your medicine? We're in a panic. We got nothing else here. Take this. It's an emergency. I think a lot of people were cajoled into it or did it to go along, to get along. And if it turns out that there's something wrong and they start looking back on it and saying, geez, that was a dumb decision at the time and I did it because of all this pressure on me. It's not going to, who are they going to blame? They're going to blame the government for backing the vaccine? Probably a little bit, but the government has more social power than you do. They have more propaganda power than you do. Are you going to say it's the fault of the people who rushed out to get the vaccine when they didn't have to? That's like blaming the public. You're going to take the blame. If anything at all goes wrong, it's going to have been your fault. How long will it take Congress to haul your butt before them, to wag their finger at you and ask how you could have possibly have been so irresponsible in order to shift the blame away from themselves? Well, remember 2008? You have placed yourself in a very tricky position because everything is lined up to turn against you. Yes, everyone's on your side today, but everything is lined up to turn against you. And so when the public turns against you and the press turns against you and then the government turns against you, all those legal protections, what good are they? Will a way not be found to retaliate against you for your negligence? And that's the key word. All it's going to take is one judge who can smell the way the wind is blowing to render a decision that, well, the government can immunize you against penalty for not completing phase 3 trials because the FDA said it was okay. And the government can immunize you against this, that, and the other thing. But the government can't immunize you to engage in negligence against a third party. How could that even be a power of the government? It's a bit of an issue. I don't know. I'm not a lawyer. I don't know the law, but I know that morally speaking, you should not be immune to negligence, charges of negligence. If you actually behaved in a way that was cavalier with people's health, then the idea that the government can say, "Oh, that's okay. Go ahead, harm whoever you want." That it seems like that would be a tricky legal precedent to set. And in any case, if the wind is blowing the other way, you're not going to get that anyway. You're going to get a judge saying, "Oh no, this case can go forward. These charges of negligence make it okay. This can go forward." At least that's my suspicion. So maybe all those high-priced lawyers are right. Maybe the contracts and the legal agreements, maybe all that'll be binding, even when it turns out that the people who got the vaccine have 3 times the rate of high blood pressure or whatever. I'm not saying that. I just made that up. But when that starts to come out, and by the way, this has been done on such a large scale, you're not going to be able to cover that up if it's true. Especially if the press is digging for it. You're going to have scientists who right now would lose their job if they came out against the vaccine. 2 or 3 years, that's not going to be the case. There will be plenty of scientists who can look retrospectively at this phenomenon and in cold, calculated, skeptical fashion. And what are they going to find? So where does this leave you? it leaves you hoping and praying that absolutely nothing goes wrong with this vaccine in the long term. Is that a good bet? Johnson & Johnson already found some short-term effects that gave them pause. They may be the lucky ones that slowed their rollout. You know, in the long term, if it turns out there's something unfortunate connected to getting the vaccine. And by the way, that's another thing. Suppose, and again, I'm making this up. I'm just pulling things out of the air. But suppose that people who got the vaccine have a 20% higher incidence of diabetes, just to pick something. You realize the number of people who are going to blame you for that are not the number of people who got diabetes because of the vaccine. The number of people who blame you for that are going to be the number of people who got diabetes and got the vaccine. Everyone who got the vaccine is going to attribute their diabetes to the vaccine if the vaccine increases the probability. I mean, Vioxx was on the market 5 years before the cardiac issues came to light, at least to the public. 5 years from now, if this comes up, something like that, it won't be that, but something like that comes up, man, you're just screwed. There's no way around it. You have put yourselves in such a fragile position socially, and your interface with the public has been so distant and so cushioned. I think you're having trouble seeing just how dangerous a position you put yourself in. So it leaves you hoping and praying that absolutely nothing goes wrong. And I mean absolutely nothing, right? Because if it's 0.5% and 200 million people got the vaccine, that's a lot of people, right? It's 1 million people. So, yeah, you're looking at by the way, it's not 1 million people who are out of which to draw a class action lawsuit. That's 100 million people who were negatively affected because you've given this unproven treatment to so many people. So my advice, I said at the end I would have some advice for you that will help. Now, this isn't going to pull your butt out of the fire. If anything is wrong with this vaccine, even in a small amount, even due to some weird, polymorphism in some small percentage of the population, you're still in trouble. But one thing that will help is if you come out right now, today, aggressively and vocally for a patient's right to refuse treatment. It'll cost you next to nothing in terms of people getting the vaccine. People who want the vaccine are going to get it, even if you promote this. And what it will do is it will help create the mindset that you're not entirely part of the apparatus that is currently forcing people, not forcing like, somebody holding you down and giving you the vaccine, but we're talking about passports. Some employers are requiring the vaccine. When people start looking back and saying, I was coerced into this by the apparatus, and the easiest part of the apparatus to blame is you because you did it for the money, and everybody else in the apparatus is pointing at you. This will help to allay that. And it costs you next to nothing. And what's more, it's the ethically right position to have. People should be able to refuse treatment if they don't want it. People's autonomy over their own bodies should be an obvious ethical principle to anyone with any moral compass at all. So making yourselves champions of patients' right to refuse your treatment can only work from a public relations standpoint, can only be good for you. But you got to do it now, and you got to do it aggressively because you've dragged your feet on this. When it comes to people looking back and saying, well, no, the pharmaceutical companies were part of the apparatus that forced me to buy their product. You want to undercut that as much as you can. You'll still be to blame. You're still in trouble. But at least it will help a little bit. So that's my advice to you. That's my letter to you. So regards, wish you were here. Take care.